Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast, where we're all about helping healthcare professionals like you create positive change at work, at home, and everywhere in between. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast. And this week, we're celebrating Administrative Professionals Week just a couple days ago. And we thought this would be a really great time to be talking about teams, leadership, and thinking about the team dynamics and what psychological safety might look like in our healthcare professional teams. And so I'm here today with Gillian to deconstruct that, talk about it, and have you reflect on whether or not you have psychological safety in your work environment. And so I'm wondering, there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding about what psychological safety is and why it's important in the workplace. Can you explain a little bit about what it means from a leadership point of view?
Yeah, so this was a term that psychologist Amy Edmondson first started to talk about. She's a Harvard Business School professor, and it's having shared beliefs and a shared understanding that it's okay to raise concerns or ideas within the groups and teams you're working within, and be able to also acknowledge mistakes without repercussions, without feeling like you are being stupid or you feel disrespected or things like that. It's not providing an escape from accountability. We all have to be accountable at our work. It doesn't get rid of performance expectations, nor is it a fuzzy, positive vibes only kind of approach. It's not that. It's about giving people the space and the respect to be able to bring their concerns and their ideas to their groups.
I think Amy Edmondson's work has been really talked about quite a bit in healthcare, specifically because she started her career watching healthcare teams.
That's right.
And how they performed and how they reported errors and whether they were willing to speak up on behalf of patient safety.
That's correct. And she found that the teams that were the highest performing actually, as you say, they reported more mistakes, and it's how they dealt with the mistakes that was the thing that made the teams more effective overall. Because we can all learn from mistakes, right? And obviously, if we keep making the same mistakes over and over, that is not a good thing. And that's not what we're talking about. But learning from mistakes and allowing others to learn from those mistakes or failures is very important.
Yeah. So myself as a simulation educator, we've been listening and learning from Dr. Edmondson's work for quite some time because that really underscores the importance of, especially because it's so relevant in our healthcare teams as compared to some other kind of either business or leadership theory that may be applied now in the healthcare sector. This really is a content that's really built from the ground up with decades of observations and decades of work within both real clinical teams. And for me, how I applied it was mostly in our team teaching for our simulation education for rapid response teams, for critical care teams, emergency medicine teams. Many simulation educators use this type of work to think about when we debrief and when we work in those teams, how do we create containers of psychological safety so that everyone has an opportunity to speak up.
Makes sense. Yes.
So can you share any examples of what you've seen or experienced in different healthcare teams?
Yeah, in my years of working in healthcare, I think one of the common ones is physicians that are working at high levels and people find them intimidating, or other people on the team feel like maybe they don't have the confidence to bring up a question that's on their mind. I worked with a couple of very skilled plastic surgeons who also did hand and reconstructive surgery. And sometimes they'd been in the OR for 12, 14 hours working in really complex cases. And then they turned them over to us for the rehab. And obviously we had to be really careful. We had to really understand what the procedures were, and very involved sometimes. Some of the newer therapists didn't always feel confident or didn't feel comfortable in asking the right questions on these more complex cases, because we could either make the surgeons look really good or we could make them look really bad depending on our results in rehab. So I think that's one of the things I've seen. The other thing is where leaders might not take the time to listen to their direct reports or the people on their team to really understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you say it's really a two-way street. There's our individual factors that may prevent us from being able to speak up or brave enough to speak up or know to even speak up. I think a lot of times we see this in our junior or newer nurses, right? Where they're like, I don't know if I should or not. It almost takes another colleague on the floor to be like, yeah, you need to call. You need to tell somebody like you found something. Because it's really hard. That's a really hard trigger to pull. And then what I'm also hearing you say is that the receptiveness of people who are receiving this news may not be news they want to hear. Often there can be a lot of emotional leak or bad attitude or certain tones of voices that prevent people to then speak up again. And it's a two-way street. Both people are responsible in creating that psychological safety.
And I'm curious what you've seen from your point of view as a critical care physician.
So I think teamwork, especially during the pandemic, was really important, and being able to support each other and notice things whenever, and to also recognize that you have to potentially see other opportunities and maybe overstep traditional roles. And so there was a lot of more flattened hierarchy or opportunities to help. So I guess I'll give an example, at least in the critical care, was proning. So flipping people onto their tummies so that they could change their oxygen status actually helped some people get better from the COVID pneumonia. And different team leaders, we almost all had to pitch in together. And so part of it was training and learning, something that was new for many staff in terms of this coordinated effort to not use any manual equipment because we ran out of manual equipment to help turn someone over. We had to do it together, literally as a team. Every person takes a limb or a body part, sheets, and there's certain ways we would tuck and roll, and we together would flip. And it's part of it is getting in together. So the physician wasn't any more skilled in terms of bossing anyone around. It's like we all just had to work together as a team to do something for a common good. And everyone had a really important role. So to me, I think because it was also new and also scary for everybody, we all had that same shared sense of that we're in it together. So to me, that was an opportunity for psychological safety because we had to figure it out together.
So what advice would you give to frontline staff who may be struggling with speaking up?
I think part of it is just making sure you can trust your colleagues. Trust is so important with each other, and the encouragement. I think encouragement together is something that we often don't find in healthcare, right? A lot of times there is some hierarchical shame factories that occur within like the physician training pathway, the nursing training pathway, the APP training pathway, whatever silo or role that you play. I feel like in many ways, because we want to make another person better, we're a little tough on them too. And so I think also recognizing to be able to say that you're not sure and what might you do, just to have the humility to ask, then also recognize as the receivers of that, they don't know. So just acknowledge that and then encourage them to become brave enough to be able to do what they need to do to help each other out. It doesn't matter really what role or what rank you are, because we're all trying to do the same thing for the same good to make it through this shift to take care of these people who are currently on the census today.
It's just difficult to get right, isn't it? And I think when people get comfortable with their team members and the psychological safety can improve over time, but it takes the time and it takes, like you say, the trust.
Yeah. It makes me also realize whenever, even just coming to those clinical encounters, how much, like once you wake up, how much has to happen before you even can make it to work? And then once you're at work, it's just an onslaught of needs and either complaining or tasks. It's like you just sometimes wish that things could go smoothly. I think part of it is just our humanness is exhausted already by 7 a.m. And part of it that people just can get a little sniffy already if they don't have a great centering in terms of their own self-care and their own presence. And a lot of times, especially trainees, I still remember many a morning at 6 in the morning. It's a miracle that you're here. You made it. There may or may not be lunch packed, but the reality is you made it here. So we just need to take a breath and then just try to focus. Because I think a lot of it is just we're all rushing around so much even before beginning our clinical journey together for the day. So I used to do something on rounds where I would have people just write on the piece of paper a mindfulness thing, like something they were just really irritated by already by 8 a.m., like something that's already annoyed them. And I can tell you, our social workers our case managers call the second we pick up the pager during sign out in terms of trying to get things moving. So there's things that are already bombarding you the second you walk in. Just write something down that's bothering you and then just tear it up. tear it up, just throw it in the garbage. You don't have to share. You don't have to tell anyone what's irritated you already this morning, but it's a moment just to cleanse before we can just begin working together. Because I really felt like just not acknowledging that, just take a beat. And also, if you need to go to the bathroom before we start rounds, let's just do those things. 5 minutes isn't going to change anything in terms of making sure that we can show up well for the next couple hours to do all the right things and make better decisions and be more efficient.
I love your idea about writing down the word, but then throwing it away. So we're helping to declutter our minds before we actually start the process of rounds.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think psychological safety is everyone's responsibility. And I'm wondering whether or not, do you have any ideas for how you've seen it done really well in your experience as well?
Yeah, so I think it starts from the top, generally speaking, right? And we're talking about culture. So it's creating that culture. Trust, as we've said already, is huge. And trust and empathetic leadership, we really see hand in hand. And there's so many articles out there about the importance of trust in leadership and also the empathetic leader, because they then create the circumstances and they create the situation where people can feel comfortable discussing things with their team members or bringing up something that maybe is unpopular, or maybe somebody's got a voice for something that nobody else agrees with. And they don't want to be ridiculed, or they don't want to feel like they're bringing up something that's not popular. So creating this space where people feel comfortable and there won't be a negative consequence for something. So if the team lead is able to create this space where people feel comfortable discussing things, and sometimes they're going to be controversial, sometimes it might be an unpopular idea, but we need to hear those and we need to acknowledge that somebody has had the courage to bring things to our attention.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I think whenever we set the stage and name and set the environment up correctly, then everyone knows what we're doing here, as compared to these random side bickering or side complaining. That when we begin a meeting to say, we're here just to listen to different perspectives, we're not going to make any decisions. And I want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And I also respect that maybe you may not, if you don't feel comfortable speaking up in a group, because we all have different ways of communicating, I really appreciate if you could send me a private email, because everyone's thoughts here are welcome. So setting the tone, I think, of a team is really important. And I think also supporting everyone. Let's just name it. There's hierarchy in medicine, right?
Right.
So I think when everyone has a chance to say something, including oftentimes it's the forgotten staff, it's the frontline, it's the front manager, it's the tech, it's the person answering the phone, it's the front. Like the front of the office is really important. It sets the tone for the patient experience, for example. It's the back end manager. It's someone who you never see on the front lines, but completely runs everything operationally to keep the books and processes and the meetings, and everyone has a really important thing to say. And so just to make sure that it's almost like a mental checklist, like the checklist manifesto. It's 1, 2, 3, just making sure everyone around the team has had a chance to say something.
Yeah, and I think people are afraid that they're going to be judged by maybe what they say. And as coaches, we're always talking about holding spaces for people that are non-judgmental. And when I'm working with people, I like to try to promote that feeling of less judgment and more openness to thinking outside of the box and allowing different perspectives. And we all know that the more diverse a team is, the more effective their overall results can be if the team is working well together.
Yeah, and I'll put a challenge out to all the people who are leaders, managers, chiefs, and clinical leads to go out and ask what you would consider the lowest person, or the person who's not even in the room in some of your meetings. So there are perspectives, even the people who are supporting you, that give you great insights in terms of whether things are working well. Because those people who are invisible from some of those meetings actually know the truth about what's really happening with the culture in your organization.
And I will say that I think having a psychologically safe space to bring things up, it can cause actually more friction because there's more things being brought to the surface. But that can be healthy conflict, and it can really lead to something better in the long run.
How do the leaders know if they have a psychologically safe environment? Because I know everyone listening right now is like, we're good. My organization's good. My team's good. We're all really we're high performers. We don't have any issues at all. I know what everyone's thinking as they're listening to this podcast. And I think what you're pointing out is the fact that a little bit of friction means you're healthy, to have some dissent rather than everything's really pretty looking on the outside.
And it's how that's handled and how that's processed that's the most important thing. But to go back to your other point about how do you know if you have a psychologically safe team, Amy Edmondson does have a little checklist. I think it's 7 questions, and you can go through those questions. You can ask your team and you can get feedback that way and figure out if, yes, I do have a psychologically safe team, or maybe I don't. It's not as good as I would like it to be. Or you could work with somebody like ourselves, who are leadership coaches and who can help you identify possibly where some blind spots are and maybe how you show up as a leader and how your team perceives you.
Yeah. And so we're going to go ahead and put in the show notes the link to what Gillian's referring to. And I also will say that I think your journey of leadership and learning is continuous, just like your organization, your culture, and your team's learning is continuous. And so having a way to do either annual reflection in terms of where you are and then what you might set as a new target for your own performance to keep it psychologically safe. And also because new people come and go all the time into the organization, sometimes places that were really healthy sometimes become unhealthy, unfortunately. And so really there's nothing that's guaranteed in life. And so everything requires attention on some kind of basis in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that having done surveys over the years, sometimes the results can be surprising. We might think we know what our team is thinking, but have we really asked them directly? So sometimes when you do those surveys, you can get some surprising information.
That's a really good point. It's always one of those annoying death by survey thing that everybody gets so tired. Oh, how are we doing? And at the same time, yeah. And then the reality is the surveys just at least bring up an opportunity, like, so fine, let's all complain about them at the same, and maybe the score really hasn't changed. And also maybe it might be an opportunity at least just to acknowledge in the group, is there anything else that isn't covered in the survey that isn't reflected on there so that you do have the opportunity to find in a more detailed fashion for your particular group how things can be improved.
Yeah, absolutely. And some other things, I think, if you're in a leadership position, some other things you can do to help psychological safety on your team is to be a role model. Obviously, that's always a good thing. Define clear roles and expectations. That's always helpful. We want to eliminate negativity. That pulls everybody down, and it can just take one person. But maybe that person hasn't been heard. Let's have a conversation with them and find out. Healthcare is very complex, and there's lots of teamwork going on everywhere you look. So the more effective we can make our teams, the better the patient care results are going to be.
Yeah.
And hopefully people go home feeling less stressed at night. They go home to their families and they can relax and look forward to the next day at work.
Yeah. I think also in terms of what we take in the education sim space and we bring it into real life in terms of how we debrief as a team to have everyone at least go through the room and say and voice out loud what's gone well, what did we do together well, and also is there anything that we could improve for next time? And for everyone to have an opportunity to suggest something. And then also know if you don't think of it now, sometimes you go home, you sleep on it, you have a great idea, a brilliant idea. Who do you tell? A lot of times you're like, oh, I don't even know who to tell now and I'm not sure like where information flows. And then having that be an opportunity to just be able for everyone to acknowledge each other's relationship in that moment. Because a lot of times we often just do our business. We don't thank each other. We don't even acknowledge that this was a stressful environment. We don't acknowledge that was hard. We don't really name emotions when we're, I think, disconnected in the heat of the moment. So I think just having that debrief the way like we do in teaching can be helpful in terms of making it safer for everyone to just take a moment and reflect on what's happened.
Yeah. And going back to Amy Edmondson's initial research was on healthcare teams, and her research showed that the teams that made the most mistakes were the higher performing. So I just wanted to bring that back around just because I think it's very important and it's a really good illustration about what we're talking about.
And I know most teams don't really think that way. Most teams they just flagellate themselves. They say very negative things to themselves and to each other about what could have been better, what could have helped them, and what went wrong, rather than how can we self-correct? Because having the agency to self-correct is a very powerful thing for individuals and teams.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what advice do you have for our colleagues who are in the front lines who don't feel comfortable actually? They're listening to this and they're like, that's nice, but this will never work where I work.
So I think in these situations, it's always helpful to talk to a trusted colleague, or perhaps you have a peer coach or a mentor in the organization. And so talking it over with somebody who you trust in the organization, and then maybe together you can figure out what your next step would be. And there's always people like ourselves, coaches who can create a safe, confidential space for people to discuss these kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think in addition to finding trusted colleagues, professionals who may be either your same peer level, maybe a little bit like in between to be a little further along in the organization or in the career is always helpful because there is wisdom for someone who's been in that role before. I also think it's important to think about and understand yourself in terms of why is it so hard? Because some of it is it's us that are putting our own barriers into talking about things. So checking ourselves and thinking through, is it because I'm afraid I might lose my job? Is it because I'm afraid that might be perceived in a certain way? Is it because I'm just not sure how to say it? Because they're all different solutions. So, what can we do that we can control? And then also maybe the lived experiences of those around us to be able to get some advice on how to handle these situations. And I think the most important thing is sometimes when you're new to an organization, you don't even know who to trust. And so there are lots of professional organizations, societies. And then obviously, yes, if you're lucky enough to also have a group or individual coaching, you'll have a trusted person guiding you on the side. But those are probably, I would think, the three main things: ourselves, those that have come before us, and your secret guide on the side.
Right. And sometimes we can reframe a question or a statement so that it maybe doesn't appear as challenging or as intimidating as we think it is. And we always want to try and put a positive spin on things and have some constructive feedback or some suggestions on how to improve whatever it is we're talking about. So talking that over with the mentor or the friend or the coach, whoever that is can be very helpful.
And so I want to end on what are the best and favorite things that you recall about your strongest teams? Like thinking through your experience of different clinical, non-clinical, or healthcare or non-healthcare related teams. What are some of the attributes that you think are really powerful and also that you carry forward even to this day?
That's a really good question. And I always have enjoyed working on teams where we can be fairly direct with each other. Everybody feels comfortable enough with each other that if somebody calls somebody else out on something, it's okay. We don't out over it. We just laugh about it or figure it out and move on. So love that. And it's always been helpful if something is not working on a team to be able to say to somebody, look, can I have a quick chat about this? And you have a conversation and you figure it out and you go back to work on the team, and usually things are in a better place. So having that mutual respect, I think it's respect as well. It's huge. How about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like that. What you're saying in terms of mutual respect and also just being able to be direct and just sort of nip
Yeah.
it in the bud if it's getting off track. That's a really great takeaway. I think for me, it's having the shared unified passion. And so whenever those spicier moments of being highly direct with me about how things might not be the way it needs to be for everyone in the room, I can appreciate it because I know that we are having fun co-creating something new and novel that requires a lot of diverse perspectives. I'm actually giving a shout out right now to my simulation education teams because sometimes it's really hard to make sure that every perspective is really represented in an interprofessional simulation. And certain perspectives may overpower the others, and what could be perceived as a very strong way and direct way of communicating I really appreciate that because it makes the whole project better, and it's from passion to do the right thing together was where it stems from, and we have that trust and relationship to know that, and also the recognition that after those strong words are said, that I'm sorry I came off a little strong if I did, and also I still stand by my guns. And so I think those are probably the strongest teams I've been on.
But it takes time to develop that, right?
It does. It does. And I think for me, it's always about the person first. So I respect my educator colleague very much as a whole human. And that comes first over any kind of disagreement regarding whatever semantics we're doing with this particular project. And I think that's probably is another leadership lesson, I think also for many leaders, that irregardless of what you're disagreeing upon in terms of the project or the policy or the protocol that we have to agree on, if you're aligned as whole humans trying to be better together in alignment with what's most important for yourself, the team, the organization, then the rest will work itself out again
Right.
because of trust, person to person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. This was really wonderful deconstructing and talking all things psychological safety with you, Gillian. Any last words for our audience before we sign off for this episode?
Yeah, just to remember that it's not always going to be smooth and pleasant, but the healthy conflict is a really good thing and we should embrace it and we should learn and grow from it. And as long as we're challenging each other, but in a constructive way, in a positive way, and we're all growing, then we're all moving the needle in the right direction. And we should all be able to give ourselves a pat in the back for that.
I love that, the healthy conflict. I think a lot of times we don't really feel like it's healthy. It just feels like conflict. But I like your adjective. It's always healthy conflict in healthcare. And for me, I think it's really just about making sure it's safe because as long as we can all speak up, then we all have a chance for continuing the relationship one day at a time.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching podcast. And we will love it if you would like, share, and subscribe. It's really important for us to get our viewership up. So please share with a friend. And also, we have a newsletter. We'll put a link below for how you can sign up for our weekly newsletter. We share 2 pearls up front in our newsletters on Tuesdays that come out, and also small little pearls to inspire you for the week. So please share and subscribe and sign up for our newsletter. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share with a colleague who would benefit. Together, we can transform healthcare one person at a time. Find us anywhere you find your podcasts. Ready to take your healthcare leadership journey to the next level? Book a discovery call free at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com to explore our personalized coaching packages designed specifically for healthcare professionals like you.